put your please put just put like a thumbs up or something in the chat, just so I can make sure that you can hear me and stuff, please. Okay, grand. Yeah, I see some raised hands. Thank you. So yeah, we'll just start very shortly, just to see if anybody else is going to join. Probably just be like 3-4 minutes or so. But yeah, I'll just flick through these slides, just a few ground rules. Please just have a read of these, and yeah, we should get started soon. Thank you. There's still some people joining in, so we'll wait for maybe another minute or two. Actually, as you're waiting, please just let us know which year you're in. So if you're in 6th year, please type in 6. If you're in 5th year, 5, 4th year, 4, and then anything else, just other, please, or like just, or it's 0 or something. Yeah, that'll please, that'll just help us kind of just to know the demographic we have. Sorry. Thank you. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Perfect. Great stuff. Great stuff. All right, I see a lot of 6s in there. It's fantastic. So yeah, we will be kind of gearing this towards the 6 years. A lot of it will just be sort of tips that we used, or like ourselves, and just stuff that you can't really find online. So yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to gear it towards. There will be a bit of like general information as well, but like that's for people who kind of went 4th year, 5th year, who haven't touched it at all. But we are trying to prioritize the 6 years. Okay, there still is a lot of people joining in, which is fantastic actually. But yeah, I think we'll just wait a minute or two. Okay. 47. Okay, I think I might start it now because the joining is kind of slowed down a bit. Okay, so second. Grand. Okay, so good evening all, and welcome to the IPPA HPAT webinar. My name is Adil, and I'll be giving a brief introduction to what this webinar is all about. So we're essentially just explaining some tips and tactics for how to approach and prepare for the 3 individual sections of the HPAT and the exam as a whole. So this webinar is being presented by some fellow students who have done the HPAT in recent years and have been very successful. So all the presenters are studying medicine in various universities in Ireland, such as UCD, Trinity, and RCSI. So we just wanted to share our own experiences and our own tips for how we went about doing the exam and how we were successful. So yeah, just show you the ground rules. So please keep yourself muted and keep your video turned off, please. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the session. So if you wish, you could save them for that time. But if you have any pertinent questions, you can ask them away in the chat. And this webinar will be recorded for improvement purposes. Yeah, so yeah, we will do that. Please also have a read of the disclaimer there. Okay. So we have done this talk a few times beforehand. We have done it once in person in the Islamic Culture Centre in Ireland, Islamic Culture Centre of Ireland in Clonskee in January 2020. And we've also done a few online webinars on Zoom. We did one in August 2020. We did another one in January 2021, I believe. And we did one last year as well, February 2022. And we have had excellent feedback in all those sessions. So this is just the schedule for the events today. So we will have some general information on the HPAT, some tips and tricks for session 1, 2, and 3, what to do on the exam day, some online exam tips, improving your HPAT, alternate routes into medicine, and some Q&A and feedback, or Q&A, really. Okay, so we'll just give you a brief introduction to who IPPA are. So IPPA are the Irish Pakistani Professionals Association, and this organization was founded with a vision to guide and support the new generation. We are a group of professionals from different specialties who believe in collective efforts to promote integration in our society without compromising on cultural values and beliefs, and to make Ireland a country where people can live with peace, harmony, and respect. The main aims and objectives of IPPA are to highlight the achievements of Irish Pakistani professionals and their contribution to Irish society, to provide professional support and career guidance to the young generation in Ireland, to help integrate the Pakistani and Irish communities, and to support community welfare initiatives. IPPA has over 800 members at the moment, and IPPA is split up into two main branches, so which are IPPA Med and IPPA Tech. So IPPA Med is more so for the doctors and other healthcare professionals, and IPPA Tech is more for the IT engineers and the rest of the professionals. So currently 85% of IPPA members are doctors, and the rest of the members are comprised of professionals like IT professionals, accountants, engineers, solicitors, business managers, and so on and so forth. So now I'll just pass it on to Munib to speak to you a bit, to give you some information on the HPAT. Thank you very much.
Hello guys, my name is Munib. I'm a third year medical student here in RCSI. So I'm going to be talking to you guys just a bit about what exactly the HPAT is. So the HPAT is designed to assess logical reasoning and problem solving skills, as well as non-verbal reasoning and ability to understand the thoughts, behavior, and intentions of people. So this test has a strong focus on general skills and personal abilities that have been identified as important for a competent health professional. So it is unlike any exam you have done before, and all questions are multiple choice, and you have to select the most appropriate answer. So there's 3 sections. We're going to go into more detail of these later on individually. So how to beat the HPAT. So people will tell you that you can't study for this exam. However, there are 2 things you could tackle, and those are timing and stress. So the HPAT is a challenging 2.5-hour exam, which requires a focused and disciplined mindset. It is unlike any exam you've done before, and it's probably going to be the hardest one that you do. And most people, the way it's made, you're not going to finish it comfortably for most people. So every second counts. And the key to doing well is to get the maximum amount of questions right in the shortest amount of time. So it's really important that you incorporate this aspect of timing into your study. And if you study without time pressure, this might allow you to answer more questions, but it won't be very useful. And the second thing is stress. So, you could do all the preparation, but if on the day, you stress yourself out and you're not calm, it's all going to go to waste. So, on the day, you should be telling yourself, you've tried your best, and you should just try your best now in the exam. Before, while you're studying, you should focus on your weaknesses, but on the day of the exam, you need to focus on your strengths. So the HPAT works with percentiles. So to get into medicine now, especially with the points inflation, you need around about 90th percentile, which is 180 points. And I'm now going to move on to a general section 1 guide. So first of all, why would a doctor need section 1 skills? So doctors need to be able to think about problems quickly and reach correct solutions under pressure. So section 1 is 42 questions in 60 minutes. So it's an average of 1 minute and 25 seconds per question, and there's 4 types of questions. So logical reasoning, problem solving, data interpretation, and research methods. So just some general tips. So the first thing is timing. So section 1 is the most time challenge section. So I think this is like going to be a main focus of what I'm going to be saying. So first of all, there's 4 different types of questions. However, logical reasoning and research methods tend to take longer. So it's okay to spend a tiny bit longer on these 2 types of questions, as long as you compromise for it by being quicker on the logical reasoning and the data interpretation. The second thing is you need to have a way of staying on pace during the exam. So this is probably the most important tip I'm going to give, is that it's absolutely essential to have some sort of timing technique. So what I personally used was every 15 minutes, I had to have done 11 questions, and I would check that every 15 minutes. So let's say 15 minutes have gone and I check, let's say 15 minutes have gone and I check how many questions I've done, and I've done less than 11. Let's say I've done 7. Then I know I need to speed things up. Let's say 15 minutes have passed and I've seen I've done 15 questions. Then I know maybe I'm going too fast. I have more time. I can be more relaxed. So I feel like this is absolutely essential, because the last thing you want is, you answer a lot of questions well, but then you just completely run out of time. So how to improve section 1 speed, again, really important. You have to do your practice under time conditions, otherwise it's useless. And another thing I'd say is when you're reading the stimulus, obviously there's a lot of emphasis put on speed reading, but you need to make sure that you're not, reading so fast to the point where you're not actually understanding what's being said. So what I used to do at the start was I would try read it too quickly, and then when I answer the question, I have no clue what's going on, or have to go back and read it again. So make sure you read it once, but you read it properly, and you underline and you pick the pieces of information that you actually need to know and underline them. And that's going to help you loads. And then another main really important thing is mental maths. Working up to the HPAT, you just need to start getting really quick and good at this mental maths. It's going to come in really useful in the exam. And another really, really important thing, this kind of ties in with the timing, is you have 2 different types of questions. You have individual questions, which is 1 stimulus and then 1 question after. But you can also have unit questions where it's 1 stimulus followed by 3, 4, or 5 questions. And what I did, and this helped me loads, was that anytime in the exam that I saw a single individual question, I would almost always skip it. I'd look at it, give it a really quick, educated guess, and just skip it so that I could do all of the unit questions, because they are way more worth your time and they're far greater time investment. And make sure you don't, when you're skipping a question, don't leave the question blank. Just put in an educated guess, because it's not guaranteed you're going to have time to go back and fill in your answer. So logical reasoning, these questions involve a series of statements, and you need to select the response that can be most logically drawn from the information. So always choose the strongest conclusion, and when answering these statements, cross off answers that are wrong and work through the remaining options one by one. And if you're under time pressure, then so in these questions, you have to test all of the options that you give. And if you're under time pressure, then the first one that you've tested and it seems to be right, just go with that. Always read the question stem carefully. This is really important. One word in the question stem can completely change the answer. Let's say it says which of the following must be true. Then what a lot of students do is they make the mistake that some answers may be true, but they may also be wrong. So in that question, because it says must be true, that's going to completely change what the answer is. Only use the information given in the stimulus. Don't use prior knowledge to answer a question. Stay within the scope. For example, if it says that smoking is good in the stimulus, then you have to just go with smoking is good. Don't make any assumptions. And another really important concept is you need to understand the difference between correlation and causation. So for example, an increase in temperature, it can lead to increased sales of ice cream. So that's an example of causation. And increased temperature can also lead to increased use of sunscreen. That's also called causation. So the ice cream sales are increased and the sunscreen use is also increased, but they're not causing each other to be increased. They would be correlated, and that's really important to understand. So problem solving, make sure you abbreviate components of the question, identify and understand the rules of the question, write them in the side, make deductions. For example, if it says John is older than Connor and Connor is older than Adam, then you can deduce that John is older than Adam, and then write that down. Another really useful thing is you can make your own whole number values in some questions. So for example, if it says 20% of the population are vegetarian and 1% of vegetarians are vegans, then, for example, make the population 1000 and write down example values for that. And if you're spending too long on a question, then make an educated guess and just move on. So for data interpretation, these questions will involve the use of graphs, tables, and other representations like Venn diagrams, flowcharts, and 3-axis graphs. So some questions can contain the same information represented by multiple of these diagrams. For these questions, the first thing to do is to just look at the whatever graph they give and just make sure you understand what's going on. Rather than reading the stimulus and then looking at the data, just look at the data, understand what this is talking about. Very important, look at the axes and make sure you know what the units are. Let's say it says 10 on one of the units, that could be 10 million, 10 years, it could be anything. So make sure you pay attention to units and you know what's on each of the axes. So research methods. So for this, prior knowledge of research trials and investigations can help you understand some basic concepts. So these questions will involve identifying the results of a study, making conclusions from data, and proposing how the study can be improved. So knowing basic scientific method can definitely help you in this. So also remember that the number of people studied in the population is important, so higher numbers would be better. And also know the sample of the population taken is also important. As it should accurately represent the population. So there is some useful vocabulary to learn: participants, subjects, population, control group, experimental group, placebo, single blind trial, independent variable, and hypothesis and randomization. So I'm now going to head you guys over to my colleague Adil Mirza, who's going to talk to you about section 2.
Thank you very much for that, Munib. So yeah, I'll just speak to you a little bit about section 2. So my name is Adil Mirza. I'm a stage 4 medicine student in UCD. I did my HPAT in 2019, in which I scored in the 90th percentile. And yeah, so I'm just going to give you a bit of information on section 2 and some tips that I used, some things that I find very, very helpful. So here's just some general information. So there you have 50 minutes to answer 42 questions, which gives you 9 questions to do every 10 minutes. I found that in the actual exam, the stems can be very, very long. So be prepared to read quicker than you're used to. And when I was actually doing my practice exams, I'd finish section 2 with maybe 3-4 minutes to spare. However, in my actual exam, I had like no time to spare like whatsoever. I finished right kind of at the very end. So yeah, be prepared to speed up if necessary. However, I did find this to be the least time pressured section, and just mainly compared to the other two, because they can be quite difficult to get done in the time. But yeah, so you should be able to, I personally believe you should be able to get this done relatively comfortably within the time limit. There's 3 main question types that you have. So there's doctor-patient interactions, which are relatively short. There's not that much information in it, so you should be able to get them done relatively quickly. The passages, which can vary immensely. You can get questions that are like a quarter of an A4 page and questions that are a page and a half. So yeah, the best sort of strategy would be to go for the unit questions that have a small passage and a good few questions associated with it, because they can just really help you save time, and they can also just really give you confidence, because if you're staying on time in the early stages, then you'll feel more confident that you can get the full section done on time, and yeah, that'll just really help you really enforce that positive thoughts. And then there's also cartoons. Again, there's not really much to read there, so it can save you a lot of time. However, there's a bit of a knack to it, so just practicing them on your whatever program you're using to practice, practicing them beforehand, they can really help you speed up your time and yeah, decrease the amount of time you're spending on them. So what this section is all about, it's about applying interpersonal skills to theoretical situations, and you have to do that quite often actually as a medical student, because a lot of time you'll have sort of made up scenarios or actor scenarios where you have to trying to find out what the actor is displaying, or what the condition they have, and you have to try and see what they have and try and treat them and act properly with them. You have to be able to display an understanding of emotions and intensities of emotions. And you have to be able to take in a huge amount of information in a very short space of time and answer questions on that information. A lot of the time you're tested on this sort of information, even in hospitals and settings as a student. And also when you're acting as a doctor, you have to take in a huge amount of information in that short space of time, in that small consultation, and be able to diagnose a patient in that time, or at least get a good differential diagnosis, kind of have a good idea of what that patient has. That's just some of the kind of what the uses of that. And you also have to be able to infer feelings of characters and what may happen next, and be able to empathize with them. So that's another feature of being a doctor. You have to be able to understand what the patient is feeling, understand what they are going through, and be able to see what you can do to help them, and what they may do next, or may ask for next. Yeah, interpersonal skills are essential as a doctor. You're constantly dealing with patients day in, day out. So having these sorts of skills are absolutely vital. You have to be able to understand the feelings and emotions of patients from both a non-medical and medical perspective, because you have to know what they really want from you. Like they may not even, some patients may not 100% need just, like a diagnosis or need like medications or whatever. They may just need a bit of support, a bit of help to understand what they're going through. So yeah, understanding that. And then also a lot of patients sometimes may be a bit sensitive. I mean, it can be a sensitive time going to the doctor. So you have to understand what you can do to avoid hurting them, avoid offending them, trying to treat them as humanely in many ways, like, as you can. So you have to understand which words, which phrases, what you can say to make them feel better. And yeah, again, being able to take in a huge amount of information in a very small, short space of time. Just for example, like reading the patient's medical history, you have to be able to do that very quickly, and just tailor your questions for those situations. So here's my approach to the section. So often you're completely exhausted after section 1. So what I did was I would just close my eyes and take a deep breath before section 2. So I'd use that minute gap in between, and then really just try and take a full breath and then change my mindset, because section 2 and section 1, they're vastly different in like the mindset needed. So you kind of have to start thinking in a emotional or interpersonal manner. And then the strategies for going about the questions. So I personally would read the passage first. I read like the small description at the start, and then I read the passage first, because I needed the context. Other people, they prefer to read the questions first and then the passage, because then they knew what to look out for. Do whatever suits you best, whatever you find fastest or more effective. But I will 100% recommend reading the little description at the top, because that always puts it in context, and like that's probably the most vital part of the passage, because it's quite a good summary. And then sometimes you can also even like pretend to be the characters and emulate the situations, and you can do that in your practice as well. So if you're like pretending to be the character, you're trying to like see the world through their eyes, and you can try to see their emotions and how they're feeling, and it can help you empathize with them, like from my personal experience. For time management purposes, the multi-part questions with small passage first. That way you can answer all the questions far quicker. And then if you're on time in the early stage, then you're more than likely going to finish it, because you'll know, okay, I have perhaps a little bit more time to spend on the longer questions with one question. So then you're not as worried about getting every question done, because you should be able to. Again, you not forgetting about cartoons, as they can really help you save time. So practice them beforehand and make sure you're quite good at them. Then the vocab can be very, very difficult. So in your practice, make sure you have some vocab lists, or like some synonyms or anything that you find that you hadn't seen before, and then it'll just help you recognize things quite often. Some words that come up quite often would be like apprehension, pragmatic, those sorts of things. Just writing them down if you're not sure, and it'll just help you recognize them easier. And that can also actually help you with Leaving Cert. For me anyway, I found my Leaving Cert English just improved drastically after that. Like the language marks, it just really, really improved. So yeah, it's very useful for that. This is an emotion intensity wheel, so you can make your own ones for these. So you can have one for common words that come up, and you can also have one for words that you are like you rarely see, or words that you don't really remember. And you can just, you can put your own stuff in here. So like, for example, how this works is that you have like an emotion with a low intensity out on the outside, and then emotion with a high intensity out or in the inside. And you can just make your own ones in here, and then you can use them as study guides. Just some more tips. You can read some fiction novels, and they can help, and you can try and guess how characters are feeling, what they're likely to say next. And then you can also download some speed reading apps and try them. Practice is the best thing you can do, really, but I will warn you that sometimes practicing only section 2, it can really your other sections can get significantly worse, because I found that I was naturally better at section 1 and 3. So then I started to put a lot more effort into section 2, and so I'd maybe spend maybe a full week going through section 2 questions, and then at the end of the week when I was doing my practice exam, I'd find out that my section 1 was like 20th percentile, my section 2 was like 90th percentile. So then you have to be able to find a good balance, because I found even in exams, sometimes you can be confident in your answers, but it may not be exactly what the examiner wants, or may not be the proper answer, because the questions can be very subjective. And also because the questions or the answers can be so subjective, like to you personally, if you're doing your questions with someone else, like doing some group work, it can also really help you get a good bit of insight into how other people are thinking, and also reading the explanations for all the questions. So any questions, even if you get them right, just read the description for like why you got it right, why the person's feeling a certain way, why certain words are more correct, like what context certain words are supposed to be used, all that sort of stuff. Your vocab list, your synonyms and definitions, all that sort of stuff. And on Instagram, there's a page called New Yorker Mag, and you can use that for cartoons, and you can kind of make your own questions, and try and use that, and that can be quite useful. Just a few more tips. So time management, use the multi-part questions with a small stimulus. The stems are quite long in the exam. Cartoons very helpful for saving time, and your vocab lists and your emotion intensity wheels and stuff. Okay, I'll now pass it on to Assad to speak to you about section 3. Thank you.
Yeah, that's perfect, Adil. Thank you for that talk there. So, hello everyone. My name is Saad Khan. I'm a fourth-year medical student in Trinity College Dublin, and today I'm going to be giving you the HPAT Section 3 guide. As you can see there, I sat my HPAT in 2019. It was in person, but I know you guys are online this time. So just to start off, I'd like to give a bit of general information on what Section 3 is. So it's the non-verbal reasoning. It's the section with all the shapes and the patterns. It's almost like an IQ test of sorts. So you have 30 questions and 40 minutes to answer these 30 questions. And on average, you're going to have 1 minute and 20 seconds, which I think is a pretty decent amount of time to answer these ones. The exam contains the 4 main question types, which I know the 60s are very familiar with: next in sequence, pick the middle, missing segment, and transformation. And as you know, section 3 is actually weighted less than section 1 and 2. So those two are both at 40%, and section 3 is 20%. But I'd like to just say, don't let that change the amount that you study. So I feel like section 3 can benefit a lot from studying. So it doesn't mean you should study less for it just because it's weighted less, because you can improve your mark greatly by studying. Okay, so in my general tips and strategies that I'm giving, I'd obviously say if you're running out of time, make an educated guess after you eliminate a few answers. This holds true for pretty much every single section. The HPAT is a very, very time constrained exam, so you're going to be running low on time. You're not going to be able to answer every question to the best of your ability. So when something difficult comes up, you might just want to eliminate the answers that are clearly wrong, choose the answer that you think in your best judgment is correct, and move on. I'd also say some questions may take longer than average, but you can make up the time in easy questions. So on the day of my exam, and throughout all of my practice exams, I've always been bad at pick the middle. I dreaded it. I used too much time on it. I was over 1 minute 20 seconds every time I did those questions. However, for the next in sequence questions, which I really liked, I was usually under 1 minute 20 seconds. So when the exam day came, I noticed that I took a long time on the first part of the exam because there was a lot of pick the middle questions that came up. But then towards the end, I noticed next in sequence questions came up. I went through those fine, and at the end of the day, I had my section 3 done in time. I'd also say always have a pen and paper with you when you're doing your practice tests or questions. The reason for this is that section 3 involves a lot of drawing your diagrams, drawing your shapes, drawing your techniques. So on the day of the exam, actually, you'll have a piece of paper and pencil, and obviously I'd advise you to do your techniques, draw your diagrams, and to be more used to that, you should do the same on your practice tests to sort of emulate the final exam environment. And for this one's more for the fifth year students at first learn your techniques, then do a practice exam. So any fifth year or other students, when you do get to practicing for your HPAT, I'd say don't run into a practice exam without looking at a few techniques and things for section 3. Yeah, you'll be very confused if you don't. I'd also say after you do your practice tests, and this can probably hold true for some 6th year students now as well, maybe go back and look at your practice tests, try and figure out which of your segments is kind of lacking. So sometimes I would do a practice test and I'd think, okay, my missing segment looked to be the question type that I really struggled on. I'm going to go ahead and do a few practice questions on that and bring that up to par, because you want to bring all of your weaknesses up to par. It's easier to gain more marks by doing that. I'd also like to say that simple patterns are more likely to be correct than complicated patterns. So when you find out 2 patterns that work, and one of them seems very simple and the other one seems like, I don't even know where you got it from, it's very unusual, but they both technically work. So to choose between them, I'd always go for the simple one. The simple one is the one that's more preferred. And also when you get into the exam, you're going to be extremely stressed. You're going to be confused what's going on. There's going to be multiple components to be looking at. So I'd say just focus on one component at a time, follow that, keep yourself focused, and it can really help you in doing that. So just in my personal experience and my personal tips that I give you, I say your best sections on practice tests might not actually be your best sections on the day. So don't get worried when your favorite section goes badly. So for me, throughout all of my practice tests, every single one of them, section 1 was the best by a good bit, and my section 2 was always bad, and section 3 was just medium. Then on the day of the exam, I felt like my section 1 didn't go as great. I was very stressed. I was worried. I very, very barely finished on time, and that was with the help of educated guesses. So I didn't let that bog me down, because it's all about positive mindset, I'd say. So when your sections that you think might go well go badly, don't throw in the towel. Remember that your next sections might be able to bump your mark back up, and you can still save the exam. I'd advise that you finish section 3 under the 40 minutes. So when you do your practice exams, I'm sure you might have been able to finish under 40 minutes, because typically section 3 is not as time constrained as section 1. That's the one that you're typically going to go overtime for. So for this one, I advise on the test day, try to get everything done within the 40-minute time limit. That's just the advice there. And out of all the sections, section 3 is often the easiest to improve, particularly over the first few months of HPAT. So when you start your studying, everyone tells you HPAT's an aptitude test. You can't really improve your mark. But for section 3, it's absolutely not true. The more you practice your techniques, the more you practice your exam techniques and practice exams and go through it again and again, the better you get at section 3. And I also saw that. I seen my section 3 mark going up and up as I went through. And HPAT specific practice is the best way to improve section 3. So sadly, unlike section 2 and section 1, where you might be able to practice your mental maths when you're in school, you're not using a calculator more, you might be able to look at like the New Yorker magazine on Instagram and see some cartoons or read some novels. In section 3, that's not really the case. You pretty much just have to do specific HPAT training. So just go through your practice questions is the advice there. And also, if the option is available, I'd say try to do group study with your classmates that are also doing the HPAT. So when I was in 6th year, I had 2 friends that were also doing the HPAT, and I found it particularly helpful, especially for section 3, when the 3 of us got together, went through some practice questions. Some of us were good at it, some of us were bad. Sometimes I would get it, sometimes they would get it, and then we'd explain how we got to it, what techniques we used, and we improved our abilities over time with that one. So just going to move on now to some exam day tips. So I know a lot of you are in this stage right now. It's the week before the exam. You're really stressed, but what I would say is don't do too much HPAT work. I'd say keep it to a minimum. Don't overload yourself. The HPAT's definitely not like the Leaving Cert. You shouldn't be cramming till the last minute, because you're going to burn out. And the HPAT is not something that you want to burn out for. You want to be fresh. You want to be ready on the day. It's not like a leaving cert where cramming can really help. You want to get into a good sleep routine, sleep and wake up at regular times. I know you guys are able to set the time for your exam, I believe, for the schedule. So you want to be making sure that you're awake, you're waking up before that time and you're going to sleep at a regular time as well. I'd say tidy your room and take off posters off the wall. So any of that preparation, I'm sure Hamad will go through this as well. You want to get that out of the way because you don't want to be sitting there the last hour before the exam starts trying to get everything set up. That's not a good way to do it. And I'd say don't stress about leaving cert mock exams. So I know a lot of schools, they have their mock exams around this time, or they may have already have it, or they might have it in a little bit. I told my teachers even just, guys, the HPAT's very important. I don't really have time to study for this leaving cert mock exam. I hope you understand, but my grades are not that great because the HPAT, I think, really should take priority, and you shouldn't be too bogged down about your mock results because you do have plenty of time after them to improve your leaving cert. But right now, I'd say HPAT focus all the way. So in the night before the exam, you want to be positive. Don't start doubting your abilities. We've said this to you before and we'll say it again. When you're leading up to the exam, you can sometimes doubt your abilities. You might do a practice question, you got it wrong, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to do terribly. Just don't get into that. Remember, you've come to this seminar, you've done your practice exams, you've done your practice questions, believe in your abilities, and you will succeed. Don't touch any HPAT related things the night before the exam. That's my advice. The last thing you want is to have your confidence completely shattered after you get a question wrong, and you really don't want to end up falling down the rabbit hole of doing practice questions all night and not sleeping and getting your 8 hours at least. So that's why you have to get to bed early and remain well rested for the exam day. And you want to ensure that all of your items and everything is set up and prepared for this test that you're going to have. And Hamad will once again go through that in detail. So on the day of your exam, you're going to wake up, you're going to feel fresh, brush your teeth, everything, go downstairs, eat a healthy breakfast, ensure you have a good amount of carbohydrates because your brain really needs glucose, and the HPAT is a very intense exam. You want to stay hydrated, drink plenty of water, get the glucose, get everything prepared for the test. You want to create your own bubble, ask your family not to disturb you. You want to focus solely on the HPAT. No more leaving cert worries, none of that, anything, just fully HPAT focused for that day. And you want to remember, once you do get into this exam, you don't want to dwell on questions for extended periods of time. You make an educated guess and move on. That's like the theme of the talk, in my opinion, almost, because the HPAT is absolutely not the leaving cert. It's not like any test you've done before. It's super time constrained. It's all about just doing a points grab, really. It's not like you want to get 100%. You just want to get as many points as you can before the timer runs out, really. So that's the end of my talk there. I'm going to hand it over to Hamad now.
Thank you, Sad. I will be talking today just about the actual how the day goes. So my name's Hamad, and I did the HPAT last year, and I'm now studying medicine in Trinity. And so obviously the HPAT is essentially the same exam. There's no difference in terms of the quality of the questions, but obviously in terms of your performance on the day, the techniques and skills that are required to perform well in an in-person exam are different to an online exam. And certainly it was true for me. Like we've never done an online exam worth, anything important, like TY exams during lockdown don't count here, I'm afraid. So, you have to be prepared in a completely different way. And that essentially starts off with, in my opinion anyways, making sure your internet and your computer/laptop is going to hold up on the day. Now, your internet is by far the most important thing here. Like your internet needs to hold up, and if you're worried, even if you have passed the test, that your internet is not going to hold up, there's two main ways I would say that are going to be, the by far your best ways, and those are going to be an Ethernet cable, which will just basically improve the speed of your internet, or reducing traffic, which basically just means like disconnecting the other devices in the house. On ProctorU, which is the proctoring service, if you don't know what proctoring means, it just means it's basically like the examiner is in your room, but obviously through the camera on your computer. So the proctoring service, they do have all the tech specifications. You can run a test on your device and it gives you, I think it's 4 ticks, and it gives you all sorts of details. And all you have to do is just make sure that you pass all those things. And if you don't, like I remember I didn't pass the first time, all you have to do is just Google how to increase or decrease, whatever it is that they want you to fix. So once you have your internet and your device sorted, the next thing is to actually pick the time. This is a freedom that you never know, really, or you've never known, rather. So in the Leaving Cert, the time is given for you. In every other exam, the time is given for you. And this means that you can choose a time that in theory should optimize your performance. My personal recommendation for all of you would be to do it in the morning, sometime starting between 9 and 11. The reason for that, I know from personal experience, our school day used to start at 8:40. And I always felt that I was a bit sluggish in period 1, which was 8:40 to 9:40. But period 2 was when I really started, was when I was at my best, I felt, which is at 9:40. And so that's where I sort of, chose my exam to start in that sort of golden period, which, is designed, if you start well, it usually bodes well for your performance. So the timing, that's a real important factor. Another important factor is actually on the day. The way it works is you log into the ACER platform, you sign in, and then from there you go into the proctoring service. And just to make sure you know kind of how the day goes, all you really have to do is just listen to what they tell you to do. It's actually very straightforward. But I found watching the videos online on, I think it's their YouTube channel, and I'm sure there's a few hyperlinks on their website as well. All that means is you just kind of know what to expect. It's sort of like, you've already watched the movie before. You kind of already know where the plot's going to go. And it just made me feel more comfortable on the day. They do tell you that you need a mirror. That's really only if you have a desktop. And the reason for that is you can't show behind the desktop. Whereas if you have a laptop, you can just kind of lift it up and show it around. So you only really need the mirror. If that's true, I know a friend of mine, he didn't have a mirror. You can he used his phone to show the back of behind the desktop. So it's not the end of the world. Don't be stressing too much about the mirror. Also, use the same laptop or computer that you've been using for your practice exams on the day of the exam. The next slide will talk about it more. The day of the exam is not the day to start freestyling all this stuff. So if you're used to doing it on your device, I'd highly recommend you see to it that that's the device you're going to use on the day. Now, for those of you in 6th year, you've obviously all picked your dates and times, I assume. There is a provision for basically, if you do the exam and something goes wrong, your internet dies, your internet dice is going to be the main one, the power goes out, stuff like that. What they do usually is that because ACER is tracking everything on the platform and the proctors have a record of everything that's going on, what they do is your internet gets kicked off, you send ACER an email being like, this is what's happened. They go back, they double check. Once they see what's happened and that, you've lost, say, 45 minutes for reasons that have nothing to do with you, they let you back into the exam for that period of time. That's why the exam testing period is a week, because the first 4 days, so the Friday to Monday, is all sort of doing the exam. And then the next days, I think the back 3 days, so the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that type thing, is all to be, that's the time that they have designated to let people back into the platform to do the exam. In terms of timing, obviously, the lads have talked about how important timing is on the day. I actually think it's you kind of come out ahead when you're doing it online, because if I remember correctly, they have a stopwatch. It's, for section 1, for me, it started off at 105, so 65 minutes, and it just works its way down. So keeping track of timing is grand. If I remember correctly, they don't let you wear a watch, but that's not a big deal at all because you have the time right in front of you. I used a mouse because I was using my desktop, but I don't think you'd be at any disadvantage using a trackpad. It's just purely preference. And also, you need to have a clear water bottle. They don't let you, they just need to be able to see that it's just water inside. It's a bit silly, but it's a pretty serious exam, so they like to take as many measures as they can. And in terms of actually getting yourself into the exam, the single most important thing is to stay composed, okay? The unfortunate truth is that the proctors don't really understand what the HPAT is. Frankly, they don't care a huge amount. So what that means is it's just a normal day for them. It is obviously not really a normal day for us sitting the exam. And it just means you just have to listen to what they're saying. I remember thinking this very clearly. Getting into the exam should not be harder than doing the exam. Okay, the HPAT, as the lads have said, is apparently the hardest exam we'll ever do. Getting the proctoring service set up should not cause us more stress. And the way to go about that is genuinely just listen to what they say. I find it actually very easy to just follow. You click what they want you to click. You say yes when they want you to say yes. Like, it's grand. It's the hardest part, I think, genuinely, for doing it online is, keeping yourself together. But it is absolutely crucial. I can't stress that enough, especially because none of us have any experience doing it before. Okay. And in terms of, Saad talked earlier about how to optimize performance. There's a couple different techniques that are designed to optimize online performance. The big ones for that, start off at the very basics. We talked about, mapping for section 3. You're going to be writing stuff out for section 1 for, your problem solving specifically. So you have 2 A4 pages. That means you have 4 pages. For those of you who have been doing practice exams, ideally you should have been doing them using those 2 A4 pages and limiting yourself to that, that level of resources. And the reason for that is just so you're used to it. I remember having, I don't ever remember running out of space on any exam I ever did. So that's not going to happen. Little things, if you're drawing a map for, a section 3 question, keeping the square just a normal size is a good idea. You're not really going to run out of space anyways, but you're definitely not going to run out if you just keep everything to normal size. Pencils, they're important. Make sure they're sharpened. I'm a bit picky for stuff like this. And so I have a favorite pencil, bought a few of them, sharpened them to my taste the night before. Completely, not like I didn't do well in the HPAT because my pencils were sharp, but just feeling comfortable is really important in the exam, and that was a way to make me feel comfortable. So if you're like that, I'd highly recommend it as well. Saad talked earlier about the importance of your routine. I completely agree. And the key thing to note here is the routine starts, I would say, around 6:30 the night before. So you do need to have, you don't need to micromanage yourself, but you have to have some idea what your night before looks like, and what examples of what it should not look like is 2 hours on TikTok, playing FIFA till 11:30, stuff like that. You want to just try and optimize yourself. It's important. Also, a little bit of a sleeper bit of advice here is you need to get your sleep set up now so that you're not relying on just sort of accidentally getting a good night's sleep. So you can't go from sleeping at 2 a.m. every night and then expecting yourself to fall asleep at 11:30 the night before the exam. We talked about food and drink. Again, you're allowed water in the exam, so that's not too big a deal. Ensuring quiet in the house is very important, especially most of us, I'm sure, I assume, live with our families. It's important, I would say, that everybody should know that the exam's going on. That makes sense that for you to do well in your exam, ideally you'd want as quiet as possible. It's not impossible to do well in the HPAT with quiet. I've met one of my friends had a lawnmower go off during his exam and he got in the 100th percentile. So it's not some impossible feat. It's not something that, like, if you hear a noise, you should just lose, go on tilt and throw your exam. It's nothing like that. This last bit of advice, or the second last bit of advice rather, it's one of the sort of sneaky problems that could arise from an online exam. And it's basically, when I say talking to yourself, I mainly just mean reading, not in your head, but not aloud. It's sort of that in between, where the problem for the proctor is that he can't tell the difference between you reading the question and you just essentially talking to somebody else or trying to talk to somebody else. Because, as I said, remember, he doesn't know anything about the HVAC. He also doesn't care at all about the stimulus or the text or anything like that. So it's just something that, look, the reality is, if it happens, you just explain what's going on. You show him around your room. He'll see that it's nothing but the 4 walls, and you go on with your exam. But it's just something, like, you really want to avoid the amount of times you have to talk to your proctor. And it's just a small thing to keep in mind. If you think you do it, I know it's almost contrary to what I've just said, don't overthink it too much. So don't be thinking, like, consciously, oh my God, I have to be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. But it's just something to keep in mind that, you don't want to have to talk to your proctor during the exam. And that kind of leads nicely into the last point I have, which is, you're allowed to go to the bathroom, but you really don't want to be going to the bathroom during sections. So you only want to be going to the toilet, ideally, obviously, in between sections, because you are technically, you're not allowed a break, but you don't lose any time by going in between sections. So you can go after your 42 section 1 questions, and then you go to the toilet. You don't lose any time into your section 2, and that's one from a convenience perspective. It helps. 2, it could give you a break as well, which is useful. Again, you don't have to overthink that too much, planning, saying you're going to go to the toilet in between every section or anything like that. But leading on to the thing about not wanting disruption during the exam, you know, unless it's an emergency, you really don't want to be going to the toilet and disrupting your flow and having to come back and pick up the pace and stuff like that. And the last one, I couldn't possibly give you guys advice about the HPAT without mentioning this. You have to trust yourself. You have to have self-confidence going into that exam. You have to trust your hard work, trust that you've you know, put in the hours, done the practice exams, because on the day of the exams, you're going to have to make a load of 50-50 calls, a load of, I think it could be this, but I'm going to go with this. And if you get stuck in your own head, unfortunately, the questions won't come out for you. So the day of the exam is not the day to start second guessing yourself. So hopefully all that helped. I'm going to pass it back to Adil. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ahmad. So I'll just share this here. So this is a talk on improving your HPAT. It's by someone who has gone from getting 55th percentile in his first year to getting 95th percentile in his second year. Unfortunately, he's unable to attend the talk today. However, he has kindly pre-recorded his section. So I'll just play the video here now.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys now about improving your HPAT. So I've labeled it, so just to introduce myself, anyways, my name's Imad Mirza. I'm the sort of the kind of the voice you're always hearing in the little intermissions. I am a third year medical student in Trinity College Dublin, and yeah, so I labeled this slide this topic as 55th to 95th because it talks about how I went from 55th percentile in my first HPAT attempt to 95th. So as you can see there, like it's quite a substantial sort of jump or leap from year to year, and my aim in the next sort of 10 minutes is going to be how I went about increasing what did I do to go from 55th to 95th. Okay, so the first thing to notice here is that the HPAT itself is not a memory-based exam. It's a skill-based exam. It's unlike anything, like you've heard it multiple times already today. You'll hear it again. It's unlike any other exam you'll ever do. It's completely different to what you're going to be doing for your Leaving Cert exams. No amount of memorization or sort of just kind of rote learning is going to help you for the exam. So what will help you with the exam? The HPAT is all about improving the skills necessary on a consistent basis over 5, maybe even 4 or 5 months. That's the real sort of aim of the game. When my first attempt, I sort of went into I'm going to work as hard as possible sort of mentality, but for a very short period of time. So over Christmas, I had done sort of 10 exams. Almost 10 exams in like 15-20 days. So obviously like a huge volume and a huge work rate, but again, it really doesn't mean anything because you're not going to improve your skill set in that period of time. So what skills are necessary? So of course we've heard about speed reading and we've heard about quick maths there. On the right hand side you can see so those two skills are extremely important as you can imagine, because everything is going to be sort of on that paper. There'll be no calculators and stuff like that. But apart from speed reading, what's really important, I found anyways, was concentration. So how are you able to read, your ability to read a piece of text and sort of memorize it and keep it in your head for that 45 to 1 minute time frame. So just think about yourself, like your own concentration sort of levels, how that has been, how that is yourself. So think about like how impatient you are when you're flicking through your Instagram Explorer page, or when you're watching TV that you're constantly on your phone as well. So if you think about that and then go and think about in the HPAT exam, you're going to have to spend 2.5 hours completely solely focused on one thing, and that's it. So it's really important to sort of build up that concentration level and your ability to just focus on one thing. So one of the techniques I used was to find a sort of journal article or a news article somewhere similar to this that's quite text heavy, and sort of had talked about stuff that is you wouldn't probably know about in school. And then I'd read the text, and then read the text as with extreme concentration, and obviously using skimming and whatnot. And then after that, then sort of summarizing it in my own words after about 10 seconds. So reading through this, the results page here, or maybe like the sort of conclusions. And then after reading that, be like, okay, so essentially this is all about here. So when in the actual exam, when you read your passage, you'll be able to go into your question stems and know exactly what's going on. So yeah, so concentration, building up the concentration, reading a lot is really important, as well as the quick maths. Okay, so timing is, as you've heard numerous occasions already today, timing is incredibly important. I take the HPAT as sort of a game of odds. The more questions you attempt, the better chance you have of getting more questions correct. That's as simple as that. So you should always aim to complete the paper. Obviously, a lot of people find it difficult, myself included. I find it very, very difficult to finish section 1 and sometimes section 3 as well. So use that sort of, just keep that in mind. So one of the tips, so as Azam said, he said that you were able to bring in an analog watch. That's going to be extremely important for you. You need to make sure that you have one that it's functioning the night before and the day of. So one of the things I said, a little tip that I have for you guys is that when you're in the exam is to make sure before you start section 1 that you set it to 12 o'clock. That just enables you to just quickly see how long you're going. You're not looking at counting. If you're started at like 10 past, you're not trying to calculate or remember what time you started at. So make sure you start off at 12 o'clock. After you finish section 1, then bring it back again to 12 o'clock for section 2. So that then again, you'll be sort of back on track and it'll be easier to monitor at the time. I remember my own HPAT, I didn't bring back the time, and I was in my first HPAT in section 2, I was like, I don't know what time I started section 2 at. I was like very flustered, and then that just builds up your stress, builds up you're concentrating on time rather than like being really good quality. So it's really important to make sure you reset the watch. And then when you're doing your practice exams, make sure that you're sticking to the time as quickly as possible. It's really important that you understand the importance of practicing your HPAT exams in the time frame. Start them at the time you would usually do your HPAT exam at. Make sure that you're not sort of going over the time, just giving yourself a minute here, because you won't get that time in the actual exam. And when you're doing the exam, your practice exam, don't guess. Obviously in the actual HPAT, if you run out of time, you're going to guess the rest of them. But in the practice exams, don't do that, because it'll give you an accurate, it'll show you how many questions you're able to do in the time allocated. And then the final thing with the timing is use the amount of questions you've completed as a sort of gauge to see how you're improving. So if you go from week 1, you're able to do 25 questions in section 1, and then week 7 or 8, you're able to do 40 questions. That's obviously a dramatic improvement, and that's good, and that'll sort of boost your confidence. Yeah. So next of all, we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses. So obviously, when we talk about strengths and weaknesses, we always say play to your strengths, and improve your weaknesses. Oftentimes when people like you guys that are listening to here, that you're extremely high achieving students, you are always doing the best you can probably do and possibly do. You always want to make sure you're not bad at anything. I remember feeling that you're quite competitive with yourself and with other things, but it's really important to it's obviously really important to improve the weaknesses, but also don't lose track of your strengths and make sure you play to your strengths on the HPAT day. So you obviously, when you do your HPAT, your practice exams, you'll know what are your strong suits. So for me, I did not like problem solving, but I loved logical reasoning. Well, but I liked logical reasoning. So just when I was doing the HPAT, I would look for the logical reasoning questions and make sure I did those first before spending an exorbitant amount of time on the problem solving questions. And also in the HPAT, you get a little 30-second window before you actually start the exam, or 30 to a minute window where you're able to check your answer booklet or your sort of the question booklet for any imperfections or inaccuracies. So use that time to look for the questions you're good at. So if you're good at logical reasoning, look for the ones about logical reasons. If you're good at pick the middle, look for the stems. Oh, pick the middles from like 105 to 110. So make sure you do those first. And also understand that that you do the questions with the most amount of questions in those sort of little units. So if you see a question that has one passage but 5 questions, and you have to see one passage with 2 questions, make sure you do the one with the 5 first, because more bang for your buck. So yeah, make sure you improve your weaknesses, but make sure you play to your strengths. And finally, the mental preparation. As Saad mentioned in the very beginning, mental preparation is incredibly important. So as you can imagine, you're going to be stressed. It's just inevitable, and to shy away from that and to think that you're not going to be stressed is naive and sort of is not the right way to go about it. So the best thing you can do is first accept it, accept you're going to be stressed, and then find ways to manage it. So one of the ways you can manage it is by journaling here. So writing down reasons why you're going to do well in the HPAT, or how you've improved. So your first journal entry for tonight could even be that on August, at the end of August, I sat through a full HPAT seminar, which many of my peers have not done. So that's something to add into your journal. So make sure you're constantly giving yourself reasons why you can manage your stress and why you are in a good position. Also mindset. So changing your mindset. It's all well and good to say be positive about it, but it's tough sometimes to be positive about something when it's draining and stuff like that. So try a little mindset shift. So instead of thinking of it as a task to do, think of it as a stepping stone towards your goal of being a doctor. So make sure you're constantly keeping your mindset in check, and improving that also. And then also another thing that you can also do is that motivation sometimes is hard to rely on. It's hard to rely on your own willingness and motivation to do something, but habit is much easier to, number one, to start and to sort of keep it going. So get into the habit of doing your practice exams on every Saturday at 12 o'clock, to every Monday, Wednesday, whatever, Thursday that you do your drills, Sundays you go over it. So just get into your habit and just think of it that this is what happened. This is what I do on a Saturday, and that'll help you go through. And then the final thing there is HPAT friends. So find people that are doing the HPAT. If you're in a school that medicine people aren't applying for a HPAT, find friends outside of school that are doing HPAT. Look, you have a perfect opportunity here that you have a perfect opportunity here to sort of say hello to people and just be like, I'm doing the HPAT, don't have anybody to talk to about it. Like, nice to meet you, whatever. Like, just a sort of network and find people that are in a similar position to you, and you'll be able to sort of bounce ideas off and tell them if you're feeling down about one day, and the other person can help bring you up. So it's really important to be friends with people that are very like-minded. Okay, perfect. So that's really that's my part there, and I hope you took a lot from that. And here's just a summary. So skills based, the timing aspect, strengths and weaknesses, make sure you're doing your practice exams in the most optimal way, and the mental preparation, managing that S word and accepting it, and finding ways to sort of get away from that.
Okay, so yeah, like so I apologize if there's some things are not as completely relevant, like some of the watch stuff, because the exam is completely online. There are a few things that were not completely relevant, but like I think the majority of the content there was definitely very very important anyway. So yeah, I'll now hand it over to Ramin, and she's going to speak about the alternate routes into medicine.
So hi everyone, my name is Ramin and I'm a third year medical student at RCSI, and I'll be talking a little bit about alternate routes into medicine. So as you all know, medicine is a really competitive course and a lot of people actually don't get in on their first try. So it's really important to have some backup options, and I'm going to go through some of these options for you all now. So the first and most obvious option is repeating. So you can either repeat the HPAT on its own, or you can repeat both the Leaving Cert and the HPAT. So how do you know which route to take? I'm going to explain that now. So the first scenario you could find yourself in is that you got high points in your Leaving Cert, but a low HPAT score. So generally a high Leaving Cert score would be around 550 points or above. And you basically have two options here. The first option is to take a year out and repeat the HPAT. And this will give you the chance to study for the HPAT without the pressure of the Leaving Cert. And a gap year can also be a really great opportunity to engage in other activities such as paid work, travel, or volunteering. And the second option would be to start a different course and repeat the HPAT while you're in your first year of college. And if you do decide to go down this route, it is important that you choose a course that you're interested in and something that you enjoy, so that if you don't get in on your second try, you're not stuck in a course that you don't like. Also, it's really important to note that if you do get in after completing first year of another degree, you will be liable to pay full tuition fees for your first year of medicine, because it won't be covered under the free fees scheme. And then the second scenario when it comes to repeating is that you got low points in your Leaving Cert. And in this case, you have to repeat both the Leaving Cert and the HPAT, even if you got a high score in the HPAT. So you can't repeat the Leaving Cert on its own, because the HPAT scores are valid for 1 year only. So in terms of where to repeat, you can repeat at your old school if they can accommodate you, a grind school, or even from home by yourself if you're very motivated. And something important to note here is that some people think that you can drop English, Irish, or maths when you repeat, but this isn't the case for medicine. You have to pass all your minimum entry requirements in one sitting. So you can't drop any of your core subjects, basically, even if you pass them the first time. But you can drop to ordinary level in these subjects if you want to decrease your workload. So the next route would be to study medicine overseas. And the most popular choice would probably be the UK. And you have to apply through UCAS online, which is basically the British version of the CAO. And additionally, you'll have to sit either the UCAT or the BMAT, depending on which universities you're applying to. And these are basically both entrance exams similar to the HPAT. You might have to do an interview as well for certain universities. The deadline for this has actually passed for this year, but for any fifth years, it's the 16th of October 2023 for 2024 entry. So apart from the UK, there are many other universities in Europe which offer undergraduate degrees taught through English. And these degrees often have lower fees and entry requirements than Irish universities, and they are recognised by the Irish Medical Council. So the most popular countries would be Poland, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Romania, and Slovakia. And for most universities, you will be required to sit an entrance test and or do an interview. So for exact entry requirements, I would recommend checking out unicast.ie. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about graduate entry medicine. So it is a 4-year accelerated course for anyone who already has an undergraduate degree. And your undergrad degree doesn't have to be science or healthcare related. It can be in any discipline, but you must get a 2-1 or higher. Additionally, you have to sit a test called the GAMSAT, and it's an entrance exam kind of similar to the HPAT in that it tests your reasoning skills, but there are also extra knowledge-based and essay writing components. So it's harder than the HPAT. The schools in Ireland which offer graduate entry medicine are UCD, RCSI, UL, University of Limerick, and UCC. And many universities in the UK also offer this course. It's important to note that graduate entry medicine is much more expensive than the other routes I have mentioned. So your undergraduate degree is covered under the free fees scheme, meaning that the government basically pays your tuition for you and you just pay a student contribution charge. But when it comes to graduate entry medicine, you have to pay your full fees yourself. So it can be quite expensive, but it's still a good backup option for people who really want to do medicine but can't get in through the undergraduate route. So I guess the main thing I want you all to take away from my talk is how important it is to have backup options. Even if you don't get into medicine the first time, it's really not the end of the world. There are always other options available to you. So one low result in your Leaving Cert or your HPAT doesn't define your future career. Sometimes you need to take a different route to achieve your goals, and there's no shame with that. It's completely okay. And if it's meant to be, you will become a doctor someday. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you found that useful.
Thank you very much for that, Ramin. So yeah, we're coming now to the end of the talk. So we're just going to have now a Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions, please ask away in the chat, and then we will answer them if we can. And also please follow us on our social medias. So yeah, there's the link to everything. We'll pop them into the chat as well, so it makes it easier to find the link, the sites anyway. So yeah, please, if you have any questions, please ask away. Okay, I got one question. So did everyone use MedEntry to study for the exam? Not everyone does, but realistically, if you're trying to go for a high result, you should. Yeah, there are some cases of some people getting like 100% out without any MedEntry or whatever, but I think for the vast majority of people, you will need it. The questions are quite similar, perhaps more difficult on MedEntry than on the actual exam, and yeah, it's definitely probably the best resource to use. So I would definitely recommend using MedEntry. Okay.
Yeah, just on next question by Fatima, she asked, what do you recommend doing during the last week before the HPAT? I actually had a part in my talk there on the week before the HPAT. So the advice generally is don't overload yourself with HPAT work. Keep it to a minimum at this point. At this point, you should really start your sleeping routine, get that into place right now, and get your room set up as well, get your items set up for the online exam. And yeah, kind of just focus in on the HPAT. Don't be stressing about leaving certain mock exams and all.
One question. Oh, sorry, go
ahead. There's just a question on how people found the Section 2 last year. So my experience was that the Section 2 was very similar to ACER 4, which is the most recent practice exam ACER released. Generally speaking, what the main difference between Section 2 on MedEntry and the ACERs is Section 2 on ACERs are a different type of difficult. So on MedEntry, some of the stimuli are just really long for no real reason apart from to annoy the student, basically, just to make it hard. And in ACER, they're a different type of difficult. So you'll have in the ACER exam, you'll have a lot of questions which are, you'll get them down to 2 options, and then it'll be really difficult to kind of bring it, try and think with any great certainty which one it is. So just being aware of the techniques about how to kind of approach 50-50 scenarios like that is one of the things it was one of the things I'd focused on a lot when I was going through my Section 2 prep, which is why I did a bit better in Section 2 than I expected to. But yeah, that was my experience. Obviously, it's different to everyone has their own experience. So yeah, you might have had a different one. You might have also had some different questions to me as well, but that was my experience. Although you can answer something.
Oh no, it's okay. I was going to ask you to answer that question actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
cohesion.
So I see one of you asked when should you start studying for the HPAT if you're in 5th year right now. There's not an exact time where you should start. I know personally I started looking at questions in August and I kind of really started to get into it in September. So that's kind of the time frame people usually work with. You really start getting into it around September, and you're doing a good job being here already. Anyways, you're quite early.
There's one
Also,
question. Go ahead.
sorry, just want to add to anyone who's doing it in a week's time and who didn't start it in September. That does not mean that you are at some massive disadvantage. Just to be very clear about that. That you can start in November, December, and still end up at the exact same place as somebody who would have started in September.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good clarification.
There's one question is, can we apply to European universities this year? And then if we get good colleges in Ireland, can we unapply? And when should we apply for the European ones? I'd say, yeah, like you can apply for universities abroad. And then if you get an offer in Ireland, you can like reject those offers, the European offers, if you so choose. Yeah, like you can do that. Like you're not obliged to accept those offers. So yeah. Like that's what you can do. And when should you apply for the European ones? Say there is, I'm not sure if there was a deadline mentioned in that talk, but I'd say like probably the earlier the better. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure the actual deadline for it, but yeah. Okay.
There's a question I see there on raw score on the mid-entry exams. So generally, I'm personally not a huge fan of using raw scores as a metric for much. I know it sounds silly to say that how many questions you get is not that important. One of the reasons is because how many questions you get right doesn't account for difficulty. So I remember exam 14, I got 54 out of 110, and that was 99 percentile. Whereas if you just saw 54, you'd think you've done really bad. So it's not the be all end all. Generally, in the exams, I was somewhere around the 75-ish most of the time, I would say. And usually on mid-entry, if like when you get 80, usually that means you're in the 99th percentile. But getting 99th percentile on mid-entry doesn't mean you're going to get it on the day of the exam. Hence, trusting raw scores isn't actually the best indicator of whether or not you'll do well or not. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, just to add to the question that Adam's asking there, I don't really remember what raw scores I was getting. I was kind of just remembering the percentiles a little bit, but they were quite variable. I know a friend of mine was doing very well on practice exams. He was getting literally 90 plus repeatedly. However, he was quite stressed on the day. It didn't go quite as well. So, and I know for myself, my practice exams are typically getting percentiles far lower than what I ended up getting on the day. So I'd say you shouldn't really look too much into what you're getting. It can be a bit of an indication, but never let it like bog you down that you're getting low scores or in the mid-entry exam, because things all change on the day. It's all about on the day really with the HPAT.
So I see there's one question from TJ that says he's first year med student in Bulgaria, and if it's possible to transfer to a university in Ireland. So as far as I know, I don't think there's any way you can directly transfer. You would have to check with the universities individually, but yeah, as far as I know, there's no way of getting into undergraduate medicine without having sit both the Leaving Cert and the HPAT. So unfortunately, yeah, there's no way of getting out of studying the HPAT. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Also, there's one question: is section 3 similar to the ones on med entry in the real HPAT? Yeah, for the majority of the time, yes. But I found in my exam there was, I think it was transformation questions. Usually it's like an X type, so there's like yeah, the kind of, yeah, four prongs, whatever, yeah. So four changes. But on the actual one there was five, and there's no questions like that on the actual med entry, like LMS. But in a weird way, it's actually easier. But yeah, like so there may be some weird things like that, but the majority of the questions will be very, very similar. Like it's the same sort of mechanism. But yeah.
Actually, just to answer your question there, Amir, and I know someone asked before what percentile you want to typically aim for. It's a bit of a difficult question because the way they calculate your points is that they take your leaving cert, and if you got 550, it just counts as 550. But if you got over 550, any 5 extra points you got will count as 1 point. So you have to basically see what you would have to estimate what you would get in that leaving cert using that calculation. And then you can just look at the graph that Munib actually had at the start of his slide with the percentiles and how they correlate to the amount of points they give, add those up and see if they meet the minimum entry requirements listed on the university websites to get an idea of where you need to be.
There's one question on, do the scores of all sections equal 100, 100, 100 from 300? I think the maximum score you can actually get on the sections is 105. I think so, because it's like a weighted score. It's not like just like a percentage or whatever. But to be honest, I don't understand how it adds up like to 300. Their calculations really weird. Like I think their full system like calculates up to like 6 decimal points. Like and they don't really provide the actual formula, so we don't really know exactly how they calculate it. But yeah, you can kind of just assume that, like, yeah, 100, 100, 100. But yeah. Okay. How similar are the practice exams questions compared to the actual exam? I think I mentioned it earlier on, but or typed it earlier on, but I found the practice exams to be either the same level or maybe a little bit harder than the actual exam. So yeah, so like I think a lot of the drills specifically, I think they were quite difficult. Like a lot of them could be quite difficult. So if you're quite good at them and I can get them well for like timing and stuff, then I think you're on the right track. And also like the percentile grades and like even the raw scores and stuff on your med entry exams or like whatever exam you're using there, whatever program you're using, I think it's not truly indicative of what score you'll actually get. Like it can really, really vary. And also probably the main thing to understand is that it doesn't always correlate. Like sometimes you could be getting 90th percentile on your practice exams and then get like really poor results in your actual HPAT. I think it's mainly about managing your stress on the day. And like, again, yeah, understanding your performance on the day, because like, yeah, things can go very well. Things can also go very wrong, like very wrong. So that's probably the biggest thing you have to try and manage. Just manage your stress, manage yourself on that day, and like trying to improve in that way.
Okay, just to add on to something Adil said, so I remember in the HPAT med entry workshop, they said the exam that's most similar to the actual HPAT is ACER practice exam number 4. Us to do that as the last practice exam before the HPAT, so that's what I did. And I do think that ACER practice exam 4 is definitely the most similar to the real thing. So I'd recommend doing that. I think you can buy it on the ACER website.
Okay, when do you get your HPAT results back? You get it like after the leaving cert, so it'd be the end of June, I think. End of June, start July, around that time. Yeah, but it's after all the leaving cert exams are finished. Do you think there's any more emphasis on data interpretation, problem solving, or logical reasoning, or do they all appear regularly in the HPAT section? Yeah, pretty much they're all appeared quite equally. Yeah, so it'll be very similar to like the practice exams, like the frequency. So yeah. Any of you have any medical adjustments while you sat the HPAT or use bilingual dictionary? I didn't anyway, so I'm not sure if anyone else did, but yeah.
No, I didn't. I didn't
Yeah.
either.
In section 2, we've narrowed it down to 2 options. It's actually a good question if you go for evidence or emotional reasoning.
Hey, if you knew the answer to that, you'd be just the greatest section
yeah.
student in the history.
Yeah, because to be honest, like a lot of the time you have no idea what's the actual correct thing. Yeah, it's a bit of a 50-50. Evidence or emotional reasoning, what would I go for?
What do you mean by emotional reasoning?
So like, yeah, feeling. It's a
I'd
fair
be leaning
question.
towards evidence. Generally speaking, I remember in the HPAT study group I had last year, I remember us talking about how they have to leave a trail of breadcrumbs for you to find, no matter how easy or difficult the question is. And so in that way, you should always trust evidence. I know it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, as you've mentioned, because context is important, obviously. But generally speaking, evidence is. I would be more likely to say evidence is the way to go.
Sorry, just to add to that as well, I know when it comes to section 2, you do obviously end up in situations where 2 answers could be the case. So they're like, oh, was John furious or was he angry? And when it comes to that stuff, you just have to kind of know the descriptions of these emotional terms, which I learned off when I was studying for section 2. And I'd say like, okay, so if he's furious, he'd be really angry, and if he was angry, it would just be like a bit milder than that. So when it comes to that stuff, you do have to kind of put your personal judgment into it a little bit.
Actually, one thing I didn't mention in the talk was that some of the answers can be like, it's like the exact same meaning, like exact same meaning, exact same intensity, but some are used in like a negative connotation or like some negative context. I think one example was the answer was either reflective or pensive. They both mean essentially the same thing, but I think pensive is used in a more negative context. And like, yeah, I didn't know that. So that was in like one of the explanations. But yeah, sometimes it can be just really weird stuff like that. Okay. For 6 years, do you recommend relaxing a bit this week? Yes, definitely decreasing your workload. And I think it's midterm now, I think, for 6 years. So yeah, definitely reducing your workload. If there's like some specific things you want to cover, then yeah, but I wouldn't recommend doing a load of exam papers or anything, or not exam paper, like yeah, exams or anything. I wouldn't recommend that. You definitely want to rejuvenate your brain in a way, just so you're completely fresh for the exam, making sure you get the full amount of sleep you need, because especially with mocks and like school, you're not getting as much as you need perhaps. So yeah, making sure like you're 100% ready, 100% fresh for the exam.
Yeah, and under no circumstance should you be doing any like all-nighter or late night studying,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and like, to be honest, like the HPAT isn't really an exam that you can cram for either, so I wouldn't recommend like doing that this week. And yeah, stress can really affect your performance on the day, so definitely try to relax a bit, I would say.
Also, like someone saying that like they're barely going to get any rest because they just finished the mocks and stuff. So I don't think I would agree with that. But like each to their own. Some people work very well if they're like just cramming and stuff. But I personally need a bit of time to rest beforehand. Yeah, because like there's one thing. It's like was it stress and anxiety? I forgot what was it, some curve. It's like, yeah, stress and adrenaline. What is it? Adrenaline performance, sorry. Yeah, so then you'll get to a certain point when like you're kind of like at the peak, and then after that your function just starts decreasing a lot. So you need to yeah, manage that a little bit, a little bit before like you're going and pulling in all-nighters.
Yeah, just to add to that as well with stress, just ask your family to be nice to you for this week. Tell them, like when there's any job to be done in the house, whatever, maybe give it to your brothers or someone else can handle it or something.
With a bad score in ACE or 4 mean that I won't do well in the HPAT? Not necessarily. Like, I mean, it's probably the most reflective exam. Like, to be honest, I haven't done it. Like, that's just what other people were saying. But like, I think perhaps it just gives you a bit of an insight into like what certain things you need to work on beforehand, like as opposed to just a definitive thing. Sometimes it's just management of your stress, or like how you're feeling on that day. Like, so a lot of people, they'll do worse on the exam because they're feeling so much stress on that day, on the exam day. So I think just if you manage that and just feel, if you try and like get a bit more positive feeling, then I think you can definitely do a lot better than you think. Have you answered all the questions? I think so.
Yeah, I think that's about where we should wrap up, I guess.
Yeah. No problem at all. That's good. Yeah. We've been doing this for years, and like we have gotten good feedback. So that's why we're continuing on doing it. But yeah, I think certain things like a lot of the tips like you can't really find online, and like we just thought might as well help each other with this stuff.
Yeah, thank you guys for attending.
Yeah. I think I saw one thing. I was like 5 or 6 year course. I do whatever suits you. Like if you want a bit more of a break, then you like 6 years probably better. But if you want to go straight into it, 5 years better. Both are like you're covering the same content, so like you're not really missing out on much. But like there's certain requirements that you need for 5 and 6 year. But other than that, it's preference. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you, everybody. I request the panelists to stay on the call, and rest of you, best of luck from IPPA. And can you kindly leave the meeting so that we can conduct our post-session meeting? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.